I just nerded out about my favorite sci-fi books and people loved it. And that, to me, was the important part. I was not an expert speaker or anything, but I could talk about it because I knew what I was talking about, because I had, what do the Greeks call again, ethos. So that's character or credibility, because you know what you're talking about. And every data person out there, even you guys who are still studying, you have ethos.
Hey nerds, Monica here. Welcome to the Data Podcast for Nerds, where we get to talk to amazing professionals and ask them all about how they're using data to solve the world's problems. We're highlighting skills that data professionals use on a daily basis. Plus, we always include some fun bits because we're all nerds here and we love to have fun. So thank you for tuning in, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And as always, folks, happy learning. With us today, we have Marijn, Markus. How are you doing today?
Good, Monica. Thank you for having me, and thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Last time I was in the US, they called me Ryan because they gave up on pronouncing my name at some point. But there were two Ryans in the team, so I was other Ryan.
Well, thank you beforehand for teaching me how to pronounce your name. So thank you so much for that. So we typically start off our episodes by understanding people's origin stories. So if you could please tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today in your career.
Okay, the evil villain origin story, here we go. This is a dwarf. I'm not sure if the camera shows it properly. This is my dwarf Dungeons and Dragons character that I played when I was way younger. But playing old style Dungeons and Dragons taught me a whole lot about computers, because I was playing 4th edition, which was the first digital edition. And you had to install all kinds of mods and illegal stuff to properly run the character builder for that game, with all the illegal updates and stuff. And that taught me a whole lot more about computers, plus, the whole Red Alert 2 video game modding scene. Than I expected. Then later in life, I became a social scientist and worked a lot with statistics. And then I learned R for some godforsaken reason, because R was free and R was cool, and R was my first true love. And you type bits and you make them run, and stuff happens. The computer does things, and I was sold. So through a mixture of internet obsessions, Dungeons and Dragons, social science, and God knows what else, origin story coming soon, I turned into a data scientist. Because I remember graduating on analyzing crime in my hometown of Rotterdam here in the Netherlands. So spatial distribution of crime, how many people get stabbed in which part of the city and why, and what policies did and did not have influence on that. So sociology and criminology plus statistics. And then I had an intake. The one thing all data nerds here dread, an intake. They told me, wow, that's cool, that's data science. And I said yes, because I needed a damn job. Because this is 7 years ago, and back then everything was still big data. This is the endless buzzword cycle, this is how it goes. But this is how I became a data scientist, by being a nerd before it was cool.
Of course, yes. So what is it that you do today?
Spout memes online?
Yes, that is, yeah, true.
Oh, wait, you want more words. I get that. So today, I'm a managing data scientist at Capgemini, a large multinational consultancy firm. Through them, I've worked as a data scientist and as a public speaker and as a team manager for plus minus 7.5 years by now. I've worked in public sectors, private sectors, in retail. I worked with NGOs, and they don't often say that about the consultancy scene, at least not when you get into it. But to me, it was a speed run, because I could have worked for 4 different companies over 4 years. Instead, I worked for 4 different clients during my first year at Capgemini to find out what work you like, what you're actually good at, two very different things, and where the coffee doesn't suck, which is very important for career
I was
advice.
just going to say, very important.
Yeah, but Monica, I'm going to share a trade secret with you. The worse the coffee, the more fun the job. The worst goddamn coffee I've ever had in my life was at the National Police. Here in the Netherlands. I love the bastards, but the coffee is terrible. But forecasting and analyzing crime was one of the coolest things I've ever done. Comparatively, best coffee I've ever had was in the private sector, banks, but mortgages don't really do it for me. So with this sample size of 2, I can totally statistically validly prove that there's an inverse correlation, or I should say causation, between the quality of the coffee and the quality of the work.
I love that scientific hypothesis right there.
Anyway, as I was saying, the consultancy sector I actually like because you get to try a lot of different things way faster than had you worked for all those companies separately. It is not how they branded the sector to me when I started, but it is why I stayed.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, what kind of data sets are your favorite to work on? Is it these social crime data sets?
Yes, one of the very first things I ever worked with was way back in 2014. Do you remember Ebola? Back when Ebola was the world's biggest pandemic, and we learned from it, we would never let that happen again. Surely, right? I was working for NGOs back then as an intern. I was doing Excel level reports on how much funds were spent on which islands of the Philippines after the Haiyan flood. To me, that was fun. That was fun stuff. It was financial records, blah blah blah. Then Ebola happened, West Africa, suddenly pandemic, and suddenly I was using infection counts, which is a terrifying type of data when you think about it. But I was using that to model the spread across regions of the country, and I was using some arcane eldritch combination of R exported to shapefiles, exported to Adobe Illustrator to make graphs of how that stuff was spreading. And one of those pictures was used on the Dutch national news, and I will never forget that moment when I saw that my own shit on TV. And I took a picture of that and sent it to my mom saying, see, my computer skills do have a purpose. They do have value. Go show this to Dad, please. And that was one of the very simplest things I've ever built. It was a correlation, spatial distribution matrix thing. But it taught me that doing stuff with data can actually help people. We raised millions to send emergency aid to West Africa back then, and I've been in the fundraiser scene ever since, basically. But for me, that was the whole game changer. That the stuff we do with data, the stuff that we do with computers, isn't just a pastime. It's how you can help shape and improve people's lives, and really, that's what I've been wanting to do ever since. And I'm a lucky bastard because I got to do that for the most part ever since.
That's really cool. And you mentioned that you do public speaking. Like, what topics do you typically discuss?
Most of my public speaking and writing right now is focused around OSINT, data intelligence gathering, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because I have friends there. And part of the reason I started out in the field of data was because of 2008-9 WikiLeaks and the MH17 disaster in 2014, when almost 200 of my countrymen were shot down, which is also, again, terrible. But that introduced me into the whole field of propaganda science, which is also very, and disinformation, which is also very data focused these days. I did a minor in media studies and communication back then, aka propaganda science. And I remember reading about old Frankfurt Schule, which is an American school, by the way, propaganda techniques from the Soviet era. And I read the book, and then I looked at the news and realized we were doing that stuff again. Literally the same fire hose of falsehoods method that was used in the 60s and 70s to just spread 50 different bullshit theories so people wouldn't look at the truth. And then MH17 got shot down, and it was pretty obviously a Russian missile that shot it down. And then we got the theories. It was the US. It was NATO. It was the Illuminati. It was actually Ukraine. Here is false satellite imagery. Here's false data connectivity and telephone wiring data. And that just badly photoshopped a jet onto satellite footage. According to that satellite footage shot, the jet was just as big as the Boeing. And believe me, a jet is not as big as a Boeing. But just by sheer force of numbers, by spreading 50 different bullshit theories, you don't make anyone believe any of those theories, but you stop people from believing any truth. And that is why disinformation, especially in the modern day, is still as dangerous as it was 50, 60 years ago. This is also, to me, the most important part why Russian disinformation differs from Chinese misinformation, which usually focuses on one theory or one fake story and pushing that versus just pushing 50 low-quality fire hose of falsehood stories. This is one of the many things I talk about as a public speaker, but it's what I studied, and it only keeps getting more and more relevant. Because when I studied it, I thought this was dinosaurs I'm studying. Then I look outside and I see it's still happening. It's just that nowadays we can generate so many more convincing images and text. Just today it was in the news about a bot network spreading French misinformation using ChatGPT because people reverse engineered the prompts they were using to take this news article and rewrite it in a conservative fashion to criticize Macron and support the local French farmers. And they were just rewriting in international news using staple Gen AI database methods to then push misinfo. They don't. The bots don't even have to write it anymore. We're using Gen AI for that. And again, I was studying this stuff, imagining it was a thing of the past. It was a thing of the future. Because what's happening now, I was studying 10 years ago. So it keeps being more and more exciting. We live in very interesting times. And okay, I talk about that. But let me rewind and answer your original question. When I was a data scientist for like half a year, they started asking, hey, can you explain this model and can you explain this project to us? And then you have to present your findings to a group. That's scary, right?
Yeah.
So they asked me, hey, can you present for 50 people on Monday? It was like Friday. And I was like, but I don't know. You want me to talk about AI? I just, yeah, because you do machine learning, right? I'm like, yeah, I built 2 models and one worked. Yeah, cool. 10 o'clock on Monday. Okay, so in the entire weekend, I was just, pardon my French, pooping my pants. And then I grabbed my books from the closet and my sci-fi books about what Asimov wrote about AI decades ago. Because that still interests me more than the stuff they write on LinkedIn about AI today. And I just had half a lecture about that. I just nerded out about my favorite sci-fi books and people loved it. And that, to me, was the important part. I was not an expert speaker or anything, but I could talk about it because I knew what I was talking about because I had, what do the Greeks call again, ethos. Ethos. So that's character or credibility because you know what you're talking about. And I don't have to do everything in the right way or in the professional way. But as long as I know what I'm talking about, I'm not bullshitting about something I've never done, I still have that credibility. And every data person out there, even you guys who are still studying, you have ethos because you've done papers, you've done projects. Please go do an internship or do a home project somewhere. I was standing on a stage. They were talking about sensors in agriculture. This other guy started talking with his PowerPoints. I just grabbed my phone. This is my Raspberry Pi home system. And here we're going to the batteries. Those are mainly dead. This is me tracking the current police radar in the neighborhood so I can see if stuff's on fire so I can go watch. And this is my plant system, which is now online, but it's offline. The batteries are dead. Which a few months ago screamed at me when the plants were dying. They're now dead. Oh boy. Anyway, I built a plant system to very simple, just Bluetooth record a sensor that records humidity and temperature and sends that to a Raspberry Pi. I showed that on stage. I had ethos because I had done this before. And that's not because I did a multi-million-dollar project for a large multinational, blah, 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 but because I did it at home, which gave me more experience and credibility than the next guy. I've done gender pay gap analyses for large HR organizations because I wrote a paper about it in the first year of my bachelor's. So many of you guys and girls out there know stuff and have experience in that stuff. Because you've done it before, you just don't realize it. Because for some godforsaken reason, we think that only your GPA matters.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. As you get older, it definitely does not matter anymore.
And as you noticed, I've just been narrating for 10 minutes. Apologies for that. But I was talking about stuff I like and about stuff that I know. So it's easy for me.
So let's dive deeper into the fun bits. Hey, nerd. Are you looking for a career in data? I would absolutely love to help you out. I just launched a data career strategy program that helps folks break into data without breaking anything. I provided a link in the show notes if you want to learn more information about it. Now, back to the fun bits. I wanted to ask about how to really incorporate your hobbies and your interests into turning these into projects that you can highlight yourself in the data industry.
So in the modern data industry, we so much focus on being better at the rest than the rest at the same things, right? Kaggle, I don't get me wrong, I very much respect the Kaggle Grandmasters, but please don't think you have to beat a Kaggle Grandmaster to have a job in this. The IT sector is the only sector of the economy that has been growing throughout COVID and beyond and everything. There will still be a demand. Diversifying is usually the better way to go at this. Again, I'm a social scientist, but as a data scientist, you need coding skills, methods and statistics skills, and a field domain you apply it in. And people try to be the unicorn that is amazing at all three. Look at me, I'm a unicorn. Okay.
I remember wanting that so bad. I was like, a unicorn, this sounds so fancy. Let's go at it.
I'm sorry I left my unicorn horn at home. Anyway, it's those three things, but it doesn't mean you have to master all three of them. You think I do all three of them on a masterful level? Hell no, but I work with computer scientists in my team who can code way better than I can. And I work with graduated methods and statisticians who can out-talk me on how to optimize a linear regression. Oh yeah. And then we're applying that in a project about feeding people in Cambodia and Colombia. So that's dietitian stuff. I don't know the first thing about diets, but I work in a team with people who specialize in that stuff. And when you're working in a team, you don't have to be the unicorn at all those things. Because unicorns are alone, because it's the uni, it's in the damn name. You want to be a pony, and you want to have friends, because friendship is magic. Because together you can achieve stuff you can't do on just by yourself. So when we're running that analysis for, in this case, Cambodia, I'm leading the team. Somebody is doing the visuals, somebody's doing the optimization, somebody's doing the back end. And it's not that we only specialize it and know one thing. We are good because we know multiple things, but master something that sets us apart from the rest. And we can function as a team because we know the basics. I appreciate the Scrum Master because I know what the heck Scrum is and that it's hard. I appreciate the cloud engineer because I know how much it sucks to work with a cloud platform that you don't know. But that doesn't mean I have to be able to do everything myself. Mm-hmm. I'm the social scientist. I cannot outcode, I cannot outmodel the rest of the team, but the moment the team asks, HR asked if we're discriminating against women, I go like, oh yeah, baby, I studied this stuff. And and then we go to the data privacy officer and we go for, I want all the gender data and the ethnicity data, and I want to have the data on who's gay. And I'm like, if you don't give me this data, I can't tell if my model is discriminating against any of them.
It's such a fascinating topic. It really is, because it's like one way you want to build your model so it's not discriminating, but by feeding it that data, the sensitive data, you are making it discriminatory.
Every time. You remember, was that Apple credit card? You could pay with your Apple iPhone as a credit card. There was a new service, and they had a blind algorithm, an unbiased, gender-neutral algorithm that would determine the credit score of people. In practice, it turned out women got half the credit, and the researchers who built the model couldn't even check because they did not have gender data. They just had a model that went like, 2 people in their 30s. This one has a 2-year gap in the resume and studied marketing or some shit. So we're going to give you half the credit score compared to this other one. Because if you don't know and you don't have data on this stuff, then you can't measure it. This is why here in Europe, GDPR is actually, okay, I'm not saying dangerous because GDPR is a good thing on the whole, but this is what makes it so hard to maintain privacy. And there are methods for this, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of statistical methods, synthetic data. There are methods to deal with this. But simply saying, no, you can't have the data doesn't work when you need that data to prevent worse things from happening. And if I may complain for 1 minute here, we have the EU AI Act that comes into force that basically says you can't have biased models. I am convinced that unbiased AI or unbiased models just don't exist. We call it all algorithms these days. I think it's just code, because algorithm is the word people who don't know how to code use how to refer to code. But every model is a simplification of reality, an aggregation and a generalization based on a subset of data. Every model contains bias by definition because it's a model. So you can't say the model has to be unbiased. It is definition technically impossible. What you can do is try to admit and control for bias as much as possible, which is what every psychologist and criminologist learns. And this is why I want all the data to check for every possible type of discrimination. And I'm happy if I find it, because then at least I can know and I can do something about it and I can account for it. If I don't find horrifying ethical questions in my models, then I am worrying, because then I'm pretty sure they're still there. I just haven't spotted them yet. Mm-hmm. And this is what I think is fun, and this is what sets me apart, because this is what I can contribute to teams. Because, original question, I'm really coming back to that. As a data professional, you don't want to be the best at everything. You want to be good at a few things that other people aren't. Your Python skills won't set you apart. Your coding skills can set you apart if you're just working with statisticians who are terrible at coding. Your economics or crypto knowledge can totally set you apart if you go for the financial sector. But it's all if statements and odds calculations down the line. It's not a do these 3 steps and you become a unicorn, glue a horn to your forehead. It don't work that way. And that is okay, because this field is fun, because you work with different people that you can learn from. And back in uni, I felt stupid usually, because I was in a room with professors who knew more than me, and fellow students who knew more than me, and older students who knew more than me. And then suddenly you're out in the field and you're the expert, and there's nobody else you can ask, how do I adjust for the skewedness in this distribution? Okay, you can Google that stuff, but that's about it. But I'm working with econometricians, physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists, AI engineers, blah, blah, all the Pokemons. And I can learn from all of them. And that is really the fun part about data. You can go anywhere with this. I've gone from very public to very private, everywhere in between, to figure out where the coffee is good. And that's how you learn and develop. So we should be happy that we work in data, because every mother fluffer needs data.
Yes, they do.
And the ones that say they don't are in denial.
Yes, I agree. To deep dive more into learning, what is your approach when you're learning new things, your go-to resources?
So I mentioned home projects before, and actually that is a major source for me, especially when it comes to new tech and stuff. It takes years for large companies to adopt new technology. I've been running my own Mixtral models at home just to have an LLM available. No, the plants aren't working anymore. It's so sad. This is my front door, and this is my coffee. I can turn my coffee machine on right now, but then it would run all over the floor because there's no cup. This is how I turn my front door on and off, like open it up, because I literally just soldered some wires. And those wires are connected to a Node MCU. And that Node MCU is connected to my Raspberry Pi over Wi-Fi. And that Raspberry Pi is running Node-RED, which is basically an open source orchestration platform, like an RPA platform. Which just triggers, if I push that button, then we run a current through that wire. And that's how I open my door when I yell, "Computer, open the mother fluffing door." That works, that's fine. But since I built all that as a home project at home because I was lonely as heck during COVID, then the question comes up, okay, RPA orchestration platforms, any experience? And I'm like, Node-RED. Because I did that. Did I plan for that? Heck no. Am I going to pretend I did? Heck yeah.
Yes.
And that's a big part of learning. I could spend weeks, months agonizing over what I should learn. Or I can just go build some stuff, and maybe later on it'll actually work. Since we're doing nerd stuff, 3D printing. See this guy? Video games people, you might recognize him. Don't tell Ubisoft, this is not an official figure. This is a 3D scan of the official figure you got with the limited edition of Assassin's Creed 2. We took the 3D scan of the model, point cloud, to generate a new model, which I then stuffed into my resin printer, and which I then printed and painted. This is how I got into 3D modeling. I had to learn how Cheeto Box works and all that jazz. But suddenly, later on in my career, if I want experience with 3D modeling, I'm like, oh yeah, because I used it to bootleg figures. And obviously, I'm just in this podcast to show off my 3D prints. But the point here is, hobby projects do contribute, especially if you then put some of them online.
Yeah, that's a good approach too. Do you have any recommendations for the listeners out there?
Are we still specifically talking about learning, or do you want me to nerd out?
Please nerd out. Yes.
Okay, so data sources. I was modeling refugee flows cross-country for a while for Dutch, for a client, I'm just going to say. And this is also a part of why I'm very involved in what's happening internationally and how we in Europe, we had 1 million Syrian refugees. That caused the Syrian refugee crisis, was one of the biggest crises we've ever had over here. If the war for Ukraine goes bad, we're going to have 40 million or 30 million refugees in Europe. It would break the country, would break the continent. Compared to that, helping our brothers and sisters in Ukraine a bit more is just a fraction of that price. Anyway, because I modeled refugee flows for years and I worked with a ton, that's why this is important to me. Hamburger prices. Do you know the Big Mac Index, one of the proudest achievements of your country?
I've heard of it, but I don't know the details of it.
I know of the Big Mac Index, which is the price of a Big Mac per country in the world for every year. I know of it because of papers, because of hobby projects, because I like to read, and because I used it during my study. But that thing I used for shits and giggles during a paper as an alternative metric of economic development, actually, when I was modeling, turned out to be a better metric of economic development than what many nations publish as their economic development, which, when you fit it, turns out to be a straight line. We know your GDP growth doesn't make sense, China. We know it. So I started using the price of a Big Mac per country to forecast flows of migrants from that country to Europe for forecasting purposes, to like analyze, well, you know, what caseload are we going to get? That types of purposes. And if you had like hamburgers go up in pricing between 2016 and 17, you're going to see an uptick in people from that country entering in 2018, the year after. Meaning we were using hamburger prices to predict people's movements, and it worked. Until COVID, that is, until 2020. Then all the models crashed because the borders closed. And I was very sad because my hamburger model didn't work anymore. But the point here is, because of personal interest and doing some research and just reading and just using Google Scholar, everyone goes to Stack Overflow or GitHub, but please, ladies and gentlemen, use Google Scholar. Anytime you're building a model, there is some other scientific mother fluffer who knows way more than you, who's built this before. Google Scholar is your friend. And by using that, I came up with this method, and I worked for a bit.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Yeah.
And no Google was going to tell me that directly, though. Nor ChatGPT, because they would give me the mainstream examples.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. One more final takeaway, words of encouragement for the audience.
I think I said this before, but I'm going to say this again. If you find something that's cool, that you like, then it's easy to talk about. We struggle to say or to speak publicly about the things we don't want or hesitate to talk about. But your audience is mainly starting data people, right? You are at the start of your career. When are you going to find out what you like? When you're 40? When you're 50? When you have a mortgage and kids and a dog? I mean, I'm joking, of course. We can never afford mortgages at this point in time. But the point remains, figuring out what you want in life, it is something you do all your life. But it is easiest earlier in your career. And I very much disagree with us screaming at all the students, oh, you're going to do all this stuff now fast, blah, blah. During my entire study, I had 1 hour of CV workshop. 1 hour of CV workshop that prepared me for the labor market. That was it. For the rest of the entire study, bachelor's and master's, they just told me, yeah, go do a PhD. 4% of the first year bachelor students end up doing a PhD. What happens to the other 96%? Well, they go out into the labor market. They have no idea what's going to happen. And to them, I want to tell you, it's going to be okay. It seems scary. It was hella scary to me too. But that's why I started doing these talks, because I ended up okay, and you can end up okay too. And actually, it's pretty fun to work in data in all kinds of places. And you should be doing data in all kinds of places, because it's a great field that allows you to move around in functions, in sectors, in large, small technical teams. Here they do R, here they do Python, here they're still stuck with Java. Okay, run if that's the case, actually. Oh no, here we use a proprietary clicky tool, so you don't have to do the ticky anymore. Means you're stuck with whatever packages they have. The point here is that we live in pretty good times in this sector. We are lucky and we are very privileged that we get to move around and that we get to know ourselves better. Because in the end, that's what you're doing. You should aim to develop yourself, and you develop your career as a side effect of that, not the other way around. I developed myself by learning to 3D sculpt. These are Dungeons and Dragons characters of my old campaigns. I made these models. I might have used Hero Force, but that doesn't matter. I made them and I printed them and I painted them. Did it teach? Am I using all of this practically in my day-to-day work? Hell no. But some bits, yes. At a very lonely point in my life, I started optimizing dating apps, because those are also algorithms / code. Does that help me nowadays? Yes, because that means I also know basically how LinkedIn works, how most recommender engines work, because it's all like Elasticsearch, blah, blah, nearest neighbor style matching algorithms. Some just pretend to be proprietary, like TikTok. And that really helps me down the line in my career, not because I set out to do that, but as a side effect of me developing myself. So that's my big tip to everyone out there listening. God bless that you stuck around to the end of the story. Focus on developing yourself. The rest comes naturally.
I love that. Well, thank you so very much for coming on the show and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. If anyone has questions for you, where can they find and or follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure you can find me over there. I'm infamous. Link below. Like and subscribe. Smash that unfollow button. How does that work again?
Absolutely. All of the things. All of the bells and whistles. Well, thank you again so very much. And as always, folks, happy learning.
Cheers.